Pennsylvania was home to dinosaurs. The best record we have are the footprints they left behind. These are 3-4 meter long animals, pretty big in other words, and they're meat eaters and plant eaters. We can tell by the sharpness of their claws. They left their trackways in southeastern Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, however, is famous for actual fossils of ancient animals, but the best ones are fossils that lived before the era of dinosaurs, and these are found in road cuts because much of Pennsylvania is green and the rocks themselves are covered. And so the paleontologists are always out looking for the construction crews on roads to make the big fossil finds. We give names to the footprints that are found in Pennsylvania, like Grallator and Atripus, because they're so characteristic. We don't know exactly what kind of dinosaur made them, but we have a general idea. First of all, their footprint is larger than ours. So it's a pretty big dinosaur. They're on the order of about 20 feet long. They live in the Triassic period. That's more than 200 million years ago. We know that at that time, the fossils that we do find in other places give us some idea of what these animals were like. Probably they were plant eaters. We would call them ornithischians or bird-hipped dinosaurs. And some of them were lizard-hipped dinosaurs. We would know them elsewhere as prosauropod dinosaurs. They walked on 2 legs and they ate largely plants. Then we find a footprint about the same size that has sharp claws. This was a meat eater. And this meat eater, we think, was something like a Dilophosaurus, something like that, a 2-legged animal that would have been running after the plant eaters. Well, the climate was quite reasonable. We know that because we've got lake deposits. We can look at the fish and different kinds of animals living there. It was quite moderate. And there were marshy areas, there were green areas, there were forested areas, there were rivers. And the trackways that we get are in wet mud that then became dry. And that's why the trackways are preserved. So there were quite a few different environments at that time. The big difference was that there was no Atlantic Ocean. So we're talking about the center of a supercontinent, Pangaea. When those footprints were laid down, all the land masses were together. And so it was really, geographically, we'd have a hard time getting our bearing back then. Well, when working with governments, it's always challenging, whether it's here, out west, or in another country. In another country, you often have language barriers. You often have other kinds of cultural barriers that you don't really think about when you work here. And Niger has been as fascinating as it has been challenging. It's absolutely fascinating to work among what are the world's last nomads, people that are actually wandering around with camels like they did hundreds of years ago. One of the big questions is to really get a sampling of dinosaurs from some of the land areas that broke apart, drifted away, and we just haven't been to and visited to understand what the dinosaurs of Africa were like, for example. So we have literally named a dozen species, and we're going to name 24 more. We have found crocodiles of unbelievable size. We are working on a dinosaur that we think burrowed. This is a shocker. It always will be a shocker when you go to a lost island continent that nobody really has explored. So that's a major question and we have teams working in many different parts of the world. Another major question is, how did dinosaurs grow? What was their body temperature like? What made them tick? Why could they get so large, some of them? And in answering that question, we really have to ask ourselves, what is a fossil? It's something that Leonardo da Vinci asked himself many, many years ago. What actually is a dinosaur bone? Is it all replaced, or are there some original materials? As we've investigated that in more detail, we realize that some of the materials are original. We may not be able to get DNA, but some of the actual weight of the bone that is a fossil is the original constituents of the bone. And if it is, then we can look at the isotopes and the signatures and the chemicals that compose that part of the fossil and perhaps get answers to these long-standing questions about their physiology. I was split in college between art and biology or science as a career. Really didn't know which one I wanted to follow. I had a portfolio and interested art teachers in helping me get a foothold in a studio or a graduate program in art, and I had this newfound interest in paleontology. I like drawing the fossils, seemed like an intriguing science, but I didn't have a good feel for it. So I went on a trip to New York, to the American Museum of Natural History. I'll never forget walking in. I think it's taken many years for me to get a real perspective on what I felt, because I've come to understand that a lot of it was the feeling, the thrill of the adventure of science. Maybe a year or two after I decided to go to graduate school, I'd say I was impressed with this fossil or that fossil, but really what I was impressed with at the core, what really changed my direction in life, was walking into a storeroom and seeing fossils collected by Roy Chapman Andrews, seeing notes that were written while they were out in the flaming cliffs, seeing expeditions going to the four corners of the earth. This was an adventure. This was science as an adventure, and I was swept away. I think that questions and inquiry is the fundamental basis of science. I began my study of dinosaurs, for example, because of a question that I had. My basic question, what attracted me to dinosaurs, because I could have studied frogs, elephants. I mean, there were so many fossils. I liked dinosaurs because nobody had seriously answered the question, what happened when you take a huge, dominant group like dinosaurs and just break up the continent that they're on and send them off into different directions? Dinosaurs on drifting continents. What happened? That was my question. I was intrigued by that. It involved so many different lines of research, including field research, that became the driving force of my interest and ultimately my career in dinosaurs. I didn't really think that I would go off. I had no idea I could collect fossils. It's almost like they walk out of the ground toward me when we come into an area. We find so many of them, but it really started with a question. When I think that students really are interested and absorbed to remember something when they're investigating it on their own. Right here in this classroom here, how do I teach vertebrate anatomy? I give them a skeleton of something they've never seen before. I say, read about it, learn about it, and reconstruct it. See how the bones fit together. Tell me something about what this animal is doing with its skeleton. They get engrossed in it. They go charging off. They've never had more fun in a biology class. Where did I get my interest in natural history to become a paleontologist? Well, it started with my family outside of school. They gave me a butterfly collecting kit. We made an industry out of it. We mounted butterflies. We learned their names. We'd get on our bicycles and go charging around looking for new species. Then we started collecting leaves, and the race was on, and I got a real appreciation for nature. I think something like that, instead of getting somebody a model car, they gave me a butterfly collecting kit, made a big difference in my life. I think also taking field trips, going to national parks and things like that can have a big impact, because you have to see a mountain to believe it. You have to see a fossil to wonder about it. I have a huge leg up on any scientist that doesn't have any experience making a drawing or being able to see something. I mean, finding a fossil in the field, when the best fossils are the ones that are just a little toe bone sticking out, but the person finding them sees the dinosaur under the ground. That's visualizing. It's an extremely visual science. To be able to get 2 or 3 specimens that preserve the skull, put them together into a reconstruction, be able to do that, visualizing is so important to our science. So half of what I do would be technically art. How does paleontology affect us as humans? Very, very deeply. Because with the passage of time, to understand the depth of time and where we fit in it, really, I think, gives us our appreciation for the world and our desire, our real reason to preserve it for future generations. We have only lived with deep time, in the sense of millions of years, for 150 years. That gave us a whole new dimension on life on Earth and our place in that story.